Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the quest for Kanji. Today in Cotton Fantastic Night Dreams, or in the version collection that we're going to be playing, Cotton Reboot. Cotton is a series I have no experience in. On top of that, being a shmup, and also considering the grandfather of the Cute 'em Up series. A cute em up, a genre of, well, shmups that are very adorable and cutesy. Now, my experience with Con, as I just said, non existent. I've never played any of them. I've always only really known of it as the series that costs ungodful amounts of money to ever even touch. But with Con Reboot, is your opportunity to play the original Con without paying a exorbitant fee. In this collection, you get, well, two games actually, not really much of a collection. You get the Sharp X68000, which is considered the definitive edition of Cotton Fantastic Night Dreams. And then there's the Arrange mode, which they play pretty different. There's kind of a different focus on how you go about the stages, but I'll go in that. But I want to start with the original, since when I streamed this, I started with the original Sharp version, which is considered the superior way to experience the first Cotton game. But I do want to talk about a few things, because I did a little extra research about the Con series to talk about the first game. So, there are lots of different versions of Con. I was aware that there are quite a few different ports of the original Con. It was originally an arcade game. They had a TurboGrafx CD version, then the Sharp version, which remained by overall the fan base, the definitive edition, the PlayStation version, a Neo Geo Pocket version, and then a mobile version before arriving in this Reboot collection. Now, it is important to note that the arcade TurboGrafx and PlayStation versions do differ a little bit from the Sharp version. I didn't really look much into the Neo Geo Pocket version, because being a handheld, I figured it was likely going to have a lot of differences anyway. But the arcade version has two bosses that don't exist in the Sharp version, as the Sharp version has two bosses that aren't featured in any of the other versions, except for the Arrange version that's in Reboot. So there are some differences between some of the versions. Let alone, apparently, the PlayStation version is dumbed down and a lot more easy compared to the other versions of Cotton 1. The TurboGrafx CD seems to be the version to get if you want a original arcade experience, which is a bit of a shame not to include that in this, because finding out that the arcade version is actually a bit different from what you get in this collection, it kind of makes me think they should have had something represent it, because it just has two different bosses and a few stage differences. So I think if they were able to put the TurboGrafx version in here, that would have been a nice addition, but that's just me opinion. Anyway, let's get on to the Sharp version, shall we? The Sharp version originally came out in September 24th, 1993, and I actually couldn't find a lot of prices on it, because Price Charter apparently doesn't keep track of the Sharp computer, which is a Japanese computer for anyone who's unfamiliar. Though the only listing for the game I could find on eBay is $707, so pretty expensive nevertheless, even compared to the other prices of Con versions. So the Sharp version has very nice sprite work, voice acting, and everything. Now, one of the things about the translation with this game, it's pretty direct. They didn't really, how should I say, fluff it up. It works, but some of the lines are just a little kind of, well, robotic, sounding. So, but you still can enjoy the Japanese acting in it. The sprite walk is very lovely, as I just said, as you get these story cutscenes that bring Cotton and the little fairy, what was her name? What was it? Silk. That's what it was. Yeah. Silk to life, and it is very delightful. Honestly, the biggest treat out of both versions of this game are the sprite walk. Now, the shop version is a much more traditional shmup game. It is tough, rough, and no mercy against you. Luckily, in this version, if you suck at shmups like I do, you do have the option to have infinite continues and everything, so you can keep going on through and experience the whole game. And of course, if you want to limit yourself and not even use continues and stuff, of course you have that option to do that, which is of course delightful for people who want to do challenges, because usually, the big shmup people, the big challenge to go through a shmup is usually to use no continues or even don't die at all and get through the game. There aren't any secret bosses or anything in this, like a lot of bullet hell games, and I wouldn't really classify this as much of a bullet hell game either. It's more shmup. You do have two types of magic that have an offense and a defense function. By hitting the magic button, you use the offensive. By holding it, you use the defensive. And by holding it longer, you can send Silk out to rampage enemies for additional damage. Now, enemies drop crystals, which in the shop version I found kind of more annoying, personally. They block bullets, and if you don't keep shooting them, they fall down, and if you're in a section of a stage that has no ground, they fall into the abyss lost. Collecting crystals will help power up stuff and give you score on that. On top of that, you can rescue additional fairies that assist you in shooting bullets. Overall, it's pretty much telling of its time. It's definitely it hasn't aged. It's not. Words, please come out way. This isn't a situation where it hasn't aged well. It is certainly a well-baked product that represents the time period it's from. It's not like there's any situations of its time showing too through. It is definitely a very impressive work. Now, you would think, this being a very old version of a game, this is emulated. Apparently, that is not the case with this version. Apparently, this was completely reprogrammed to function on modern consoles. So that's pretty impressive that they didn't simply take the lazy route. They went and took their time to make sure this version is definitely and well crafted into the Switch and PS4. And that's impressive, time consuming, I would imagine. And I did not have any problems. I don't feel any delays, flickering problems, any stretching or weird effects that you would usually get sometimes when companies mash things in emulators and that. Now, of course, I have no experience playing any shop games, so take that with a grain of salt, but nothing seemed off to me, and Pat, who is a big shmup person, didn't have any comments of any negativity towards anything other than the localization of the story, which is understandable. Personally, I would like to note that I got the strictly limited version, which actually came with a manual, which was shocking. But it did kind of confuse me at first, because now Cotton is a female witch, but in this manual, it uses he pronouns. However, when he hears that he can get his favorite food, Willow, which confused the living crap out of me, because I was like, wait, is this a drawn, a feminine-looking boy syndrome problem then? But Upon double checking, Cotton is indeed a female, so someone screwed up for this manual. Luckily, the translation in the game does not make this mistake and does properly identify Cotton as a female, so that would have probably been even weirder if that had swung by. I would imagine the manual was a issue with strictly limited games, I would imagine, because I don't know if the Japanese one came with one, but the story with this game is probably one of the lamer aspects. I mean, it's a shmup game. Shmup games are, of course, not usually known for deep, meaningful stories a lot of times, so it probably not really surprised many, but if you're coming here for a story, you're not going to find anything too crazy. Cotton is a greedy witch that likes this candy called Willow, and the world has been thrown into darkness, and then you're basically begged by the fairy to go and help the world, and then uses the excuse that you can find this legendary gigantic willow if you help us, and Cotton goes along the journey to get this giant piece of willow candy. Very simple, to the point, and it makes a few comedic scenes during the story scenes because of being a spoiled brat as opposed to being this grand hero or anything like that. It sets up the story, but yeah, not any grand payoff or anything. The sprite work, as I said, is, to me, what I was just most impressed by that. But it's not a complicated game on the Sharp version outside of just being hard. I mean, it's complicated in surviving, but I mean, understanding the controls and everything is pretty basic and simple. Now, there is a leaderboard mode for both the range and Sharp version, so if you prefer the Sharp version only, because I would imagine several people will be buying this just for the Sharp version. As I said, it's considered the definitive Cotton 1 game version, and it is not easy to get your hands on, apparently. And apparently, from what I understand, it's not an easy version to emulate, even though it's a really old game, which shows you why emulation isn't always perfect. It's good to have it as an option, but as you can see, some old stuff still continues to baffle people in trying to get to emulate properly, which is a shame for games like this. The Sharp version is a great way to experience this game, in my opinion, though, because comparing the two bosses that were in arcade-only versions, I'd say the two bosses that will place them in this version are better, and I can see why people see it as the definitive version, even though it drifts just a bit from the arcade version. Other than that, it's considered superior to the arcade version because the sprite, music, and voice acting just all considered superior in it. And comparing them, yeah, I'd say the sprite work went into a lot more detail on this. The shop was apparently well known for being very arcade-like, kind of like the Neo Geo was when it came out. So, for its time. So, it's very impressive looking. So going to the arrange mode. The arrange mode, I would say, is a mix of trying to not necessarily remaster, but I guess you could say it's more of a remake of the Sharp version with a lot of new things. They added 2 new types of magic and completely changed the dynamic that is between your character and crystals. Crystals now float. Shooting at crystals allows your shots to go through and split into a triangle formation, cone kind of triangle, and shoot more things. So they no longer block your bullets, which was the thing I found very annoying about them in the Sharp version. So you can use them as a strategical way to hit more stuff on the screens. And it is delightfully. Everything goes boom really good. And the sprite work and everything was notched up. They tried to stick to a lot of the similar scenes and design of during the story scenes. Like, it is basically based on the shop portion. It has the shop exclusive bosses, though one of them was a bit changed in its design of how it looked, but functioned the same way that it acts. Fundamentally, the arrange modes difference, in my opinion, to the shop version is the kind of attitude you go into. The shop version, like I said, is a very classic shmup type game. Arrange mode seems kind of like a freaking horde control kind of thing. There's a lot of enemies constantly coming on screen, and it feels like I don't have a good example of it, but I know there are a few well-known shmups that are considered like if you die, you just restart the game because it's basically essential to have all the power-ups. And that's kind of what the arrange mode feels like if it wasn't for the fact that you have infinite continues. So unless you put that limitation in yourself, you can keep going forward. But if you were going to do this a one life kind of one thing, I definitely would say the arrange mode feels like the kind of experience where you need to build your power meter up and not die and keep things cleared up on the screen. But they added, as I said, 2 new types of magic. On top of that, the back part of Khan's broom apparently can hurt enemies, which I wasn't aware of until I started a little research into the arrange mode. So you have a little back defense, which is useful because there is a later stage where there are a lot of enemies that appear behind you. So I can see that being helpful. It's a shame I didn't actually know that, though you still can't shoot any bullets behind you. The range mode is definitely for the more modern people, though. It definitely is a much easier experience, but it is a bit hectic. There's a lot of sprites, bullets, gun effects, and on top of that, being more focused around getting a higher score, because shmups are very arcadey in nature, so it's no surprise that it takes a greater focus on getting a higher skill, as you have this frenzy mode that helps you allow you to achieve a higher score. Get lots of points, and it causes a lot of numbers to show up on screen. There is just a lot of stuff smushed on the screen, and it kind of makes it hard to keep track of enemy bullets. That's probably my biggest complaint with the range mode. As the game goes on, and more enemies, and just explosions going everywhere, it just starts becoming harder to keep track of enemy bullets, in my opinion. Apparently, currently in the Japanese version, there was an update that adds the ability to see the bullets better. I have not found any video of this specifically, though. This update is apparently not in the English Europe version yet, and is the American version out yet? Yes, the American version is released, so I'm not sure if the update is in the American retail version that. I have the strictly limited edition, which is a European limited company, and at that time, there was no announcement of it getting retail in America, so. Now, something I do want to talk about with the different versions of this game there are, as there's a Japanese, Europe, and English American version. Now, the Japanese version does have English on the physical version, but apparently it was patched out recently, which is kind of confusing because it's there already. Now, I've seen a few limited groups say that strictly limited basically is like, get that shit out of this, all version can sell kind of thing, which I don't know if that was the case. After all, it did get an American physical release as well, so that could have been something the publisher themselves decided to ensure that version might sell, maybe? I'm not quite sure. But a number of people were very mad and pointing fingers at different people. I did reach out both to ININ, the publisher, and strictly limited games for any comment on this subject, because, well, I like to try and get proper information, not speculate too much, or at least not try to spread speculation as facts, at least. So I did reach out to them, and if I did get a response from them before I get this all finished, I will post that somewhere around here, and maybe have some text as a reply to whatever they may have said. I would say it might have been more likely in a my speculation would be it's probably more likely IN did themselves, because they started selling their own physical version in America. But who knows? I don't know. But it is a weird choice to take out something that was already on the disc. So if you do get the Japanese version, keep that in mind. Do not patch it if you want to be able to read anything, or at least experience the game, like one time through, so you can read it and then update it. Now apparently they're adding a character from Con 2 as a free update into this game too. Now, I could not find any footage of her outside the trailer and the news of her being added into the game. However, it supposedly happened in May, but I can't find any existence of her, so I'm wondering if it's been delayed. I'm not sure. I looked up seeing about unlocking her, and then I just can't find anything about her outside the trailer and the announcement. So I want to say it was probably delayed for all versions. So either way, though, I didn't have any real problems with the game. So again, Arrange Mode also has a ranking system, like I said, with the short version, and on top of that, there was a new time attack version. There's the 2-minute and 5-minute version, so you can you have that much time to get as high a score you can, and again, it has its own ranking mode. So you have all that as options. Now, when it comes to actual options, currently for range mode, you can play as Silicon Khan. You have to play through the game one time to get Silicon. You have the ability to change how many player stock you have and how hard the game is. For range, you have easy, normal, and hard. While on the shop version, which apparently the original shop version did include options for difficulty, which is something I thought was a little kind of shocking, actually, because I figured all of that was probably new, but it wasn't. It wasn't new, because one video I checked out for information on that actually showed someone with the shop version. So the shop version had normal, hard, hardest, you do, and what's actually new in this version is Beat Edition difficulty. Again, you can change your stock. Stock is not a big deal, like I said, because you do have infinite continues. So, and you can rebind controls and things, so that's all really good and dandy and all that. But outside that, you're not getting a whole lot of special stuff outside of being able to see, like, story scenes and things. But both versions are really good, and again, other than this version of Con, every other Con game is super fucking expensive. So if you've ever wanted to try Con, this is your chance, quite honestly. I mean, look at these prices. See, TurboGrafx CD, Japanese version is 130 loose. Then you got, let's see, Neo Geo Pocket 430. The American TurboGrafx CD 220 loose. The Japanese original $111. Yikes. Really expensive. And like I said, the only listing of the shop version I could find is $707 on eBay. So, yeah, unless those prices look a lot better to you, this is probably the better course of action to experience Con 1, honestly. Again, I do feel like it's a bit of a shame they didn't put one of the arcade versions, if not like the arcade version, the TurboGrafx. From what I see comparing them, the TurboGrafx seems to be the superior choice in that sense, since the Japanese version is dumbed down. But, you know, even if it was just the original arcade version, that'd be a nice touch itself. I think that way you could experience some form of each one. But, you know, like I said, the shop version is considered the definitive by its fan base, so it's not surprising to see the arrange mode be based on that. I think another option they could have done was make the arrange mode have both. It could have been an excuse to add the 2 additional bosses that were unique to the versions that were based on the arcade version into arrange, along with the 2 bosses that are from the shop version. And maybe could have been even an excuse to have some different stages on top of it, maybe. But I think I would just prefer the TurboGrafx CD version. Plus, listening to the music in that version is pretty good. The music's all really good in all the versions. Sharp's pretty good. Listening to comparisons to the different tracks, I liked the Sharp and TurboGrafx versions of a lot of the songs. Range, they're not terrible, but of course, music is subjective, so I'm sure a lot of people have their different opinions on which ones they like. So, and you can pick whether you want to listen to the Sharp version or the range version. So, you are not mandatory to listen to the range if you dislike it. So that's all good and dandy. So, it's pretty good, honestly. I mean, considering these games are super fucking expensive if you ever wanted to try them before, so I honestly don't see it as a huge negative. I wouldn't mind seeing a few other con versions in this or something. Because, I mean, like, for example, the Darius collection that Strictly Limited did just had, like, oodles of different Darius games in them. So, it just feels kind of lacking compared to something like that, but considering the work they did in the shop version, I think I can forgive the lack of other versions. It's just something I think I would have personally liked to see in it. So, it's a good game, honestly. I'm not a big shmup person. It's definitely a hard shmup game. Even the arrange mode is rough on me. I died quite a few times even in it. So if you're looking for a good beginner game that you can actually play with some skill, you're probably not going to find it here, really. It is good, though. And like I said, it has infinite continue, so if you're concerned about, like, oh, you got 3 lives and then you got to start the whole game over, you don't have to worry about that unless you put that limitation on yourself. Honestly, I would check out Con if you have any interest in shmup games. Shmup games, of course, usually the bigger thing is about replaying, getting your skill up to where you can beat the game in one life. But, you know, I usually move along after I finish a game, so likely not what I'm doing myself. But it's a good game. I really like the charming characters in that. Like I said, the dialogue in English is a little bit stiff, robotic, but it gets the job done. Now, value, like I said, is a bit weird for this one, considering every other con game is super freaking expensive. So, regardless of whether you think its normal price is worth it or not, it's vastly cheaper regardless. So, this game is $39.99 physically for the American retail version, and apparently it is eventually going to be on Steam. I don't think it's on Steam yet, but apparently it was announced for it. Reboot, Steam, let me double check that. But it is $39.99. It is currently not on Steam yet. Apparently it's supposed to, though. But anyway, it's $39.99 for the American retail release. If you're looking into the strictly limited version, which had 3 versions, it had the collector's edition and then the shop edition, which the shop edition is sold out and, you know, being scalped like insane on eBay. But they still have the collector's editions, which are $94, and their version of the standard on PS4 and Switch is $47 because, you know, shipping and being in a different country and currency exchange and that. So now that it does have an American retail release, unless you like the cover art or something specifically more of a different region, that's the better route to go, is to get the American retail for America. Now, obviously, if you live in Europe, maybe it might be better for you to check out the strictly limited version, but you will have to look at that at your own accord. Now, you can also get this on Play Asia as well, which the Play Asia version for Japan is $46 in America. The European retail version, because there is retail for the Europe version as well, is $49.99, and they are selling the American version also on Play Asia for $44.99. So a little variety on the price tag, and they have the Japanese limited edition actually still in stock for the Japanese versions too. 91 for the PS4 version, 94 for the Switch version. So lots of shopping options, depending on you want standard, which country or cover you might particularly want. Obviously, you'll get English on Europe and American, but I want we say if you get the Japanese version and you want to have English, don't update it because they patched it out, which is still very weird to me. I don't know if I've ever heard of a case of that happening before. It's very bizarre. I know there's been a lot of claims before of Limited One games telling publishers not to have English in their Japanese version so they can release the English version, but I don't think I've ever heard of it being patched out after OA being released. Very bizarre situation, honestly. But what would I give the value of this Cotton reboot? Honestly, it is a very good shmup game. It's just, I'm not a big shmup person, and it's pretty rough on me. But if you're a big shmup person, especially for the Sharp version, because I feel like that's definitely the classical shmup experience needing a lot of skill. Because a range, like I said, is a lot easier, but it's still enjoyable. Still enjoyable and beautiful in that. But the Sharp version, I do really have to agree, is the highlight here, because it's definitely a very beautiful sprite game, considering the time period it was made in. I mean, come on. How could you not? I mean, it was made in 1993. Those are beautiful looking sprites for that time period, bro. That's beautiful stuff. Anyway. But I do think the $39.99 price tag is a fair price for this. Again, I would have liked to maybe seen one of the arcade versions in this. I know I've said that lots and lots of times. I just kind of think it would have been nice to have either the original arcade or the TurboGrafx version here to represent the differences between the Sharp and the arcade experience. But it's not the end of the world, and maybe we'll get a collection down the road that might have some other versions of Cotton, but who knows. Now, there is another Cotton collection coming, though. I believe it was called, let me look here, where was it? The Cotton Guardian Force Saturn Tribute, which is Cotton 2, Cotton Boomerang, and Cotton Guardian Force, which I believe are all Saturn releases, if I remember correctly, which is, of course, again, likely going to be all games that cost ungodful amounts of money, likely. And the Saturn being a, system well renowned for beautiful sprite work, it'll likely be a very lovely collection to get your hands on. Currently, the game only has a Japanese release, I believe, only, so that version we'll talk about in time, though, because I did pre-ordered that off PlayAsia, so that one I'll look forward to. Hopefully that doesn't end up in a similar situation with this one getting stuff patched out. That still seems like a really stupid thing to me. But yeah, I think the $40 price tag is good. As for like, you know, the older versions that are like $100 to $500, if you want like sealed copies, holy shit. The Neo Geo Pocket version is $1,619 fucking sealed. But those prices, I don't think of. I mean, as legendary as this game has historically, it's hard to justify hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a game, honestly. And especially when it's a really short game. So unless you really plan on spending hundreds of hours playing the game, it's just really hard to justify that much money. But, you know, you have a better judge of that. Definitely recommend checking this out as a shmup person. Or the spite work, honestly, too. I mean, the spites are just beautiful, man. They're beautiful. But either way, those are my thoughts on Con Reboot. It's a nice collection of an old classic and a arranged version of the game. Again, I would have liked to see some other versions of Con in here, but be fair, that's more work. So anyway, if you have any questions or comments or anything you want about the product, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Leave me a message on Twitch. If you feel like you learned anything interesting in this, please feel free to leave a like. And if you feel like you learned nothing at all, feel free to leave a dislike guilt-free. And until next time, I'll see you out there in the fairyland.